over to you. As you all likely know, it is May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And in honor of that, and to continue to generate awareness around this important topic, we've invited Emily and Morgan's message to present at our Coaches Corner today. So Emily Perrin is a mindfulness and performance coach, licensed master of social work, and former Division I athlete. Emily's background in competitive sports, coupled with her personal journey navigating mental health challenges, has fueled her passion for reshaping the sports culture to be more mental health aware and trauma informed. Through her business, Perrin Wellness and Performance, Emily offers holistic mental health, resiliency, and mindfulness programming, prioritizing inclusive and trauma-informed approaches. Emily is also involved with Morgan's Message, an organization dedicated to eliminating the stigma surrounding mental health within the student-athlete community and equalizing the treatment of physical and mental health in athletics. Their initiative expands the dialogue on mental health by normalizing conversations, empowering those who suffer in silence, and supporting those who feel alone. With extensive training in trauma, mindfulness, and integrative health coaching, Emily aims to promote fulfillment, joy, and success beyond winning in the sports community. Please join me in welcoming Emily and Morgan's Message to our NFHCA Coaches Corner. I will turn it over to you, Emily.
Wow, thank you so much. Welcome everyone. I know we can't see faces here, but we know you're with us, whether in person right now or virtually later. So I'm so excited to be here. I know all of us at Morgan's Message, we love this work. I love this work, and actually working with coaches is a passion of mine. I am the daughter of a former college coach. My dad coached college basketball at the University of Virginia for 15 years. I coached at the University of Pennsylvania, in addition to lots of coaching at the youth level. So this conversation around mental health it's big, it's needed, and it's constantly changing because mental health is constantly changing. So this is a passion of mine. I'm so excited. I have been looking forward to this session for close to 3 months now. So I'm going to share my screen and we are going to dive right in. We have a ton to cover in the hour that we are together. So we are just going to get right to it. Okay. And Kate, if at any point you can't see anything, just let me know, but hopefully that should be good. So really the topic today is, we're really going to attack this, like, what is mental health? And really, I think so much of helping coaches, sport coaches, understand mental health through the lens of what I call resiliency opens so much awareness to then helping you guys turn around and help your athletes in that. So that's really where we're going today. So here's kind of our outline. You guys may be laughing, like I am a coach, right? I have a practice plan. This is our practice plan for the day. I'll talk a little bit about Morgan's Message and then my background. We'll talk about what is mental health. We're really going to break it down from my lens as, again, a former athlete, former coach, and now mental health therapist and mindfulness coach. And then really look at, well, how do we broaden this lens so that we can actually show up in the most effective way as sport coaches? And then I'm going to give you some actual tangible tools and skills to walk out the door with. So lots to cover. The first thing I always say, though, is, so much of this conversation and what we're talking about today, it relies on trust. And the reality is that many of you, you don't know me and I don't know you. We are just meeting today. You're seeing me on a screen through Morgan's Message, but we don't have an ongoing continued relationship, and trust and discernment are going to be really important. So I always say with this stuff, like, I'm coming from my background and my areas of expertise, but in no way, shape, or form do I have all the answers. And is my way the way to do it all? It's not. I know firsthand that I don't know everything because we're constantly learning about this work. And also, I will say, every time that I go in and do any type of coaching education, like, I always walk away from learning from the coaches that I work with. So you're the expert in you, and you are certainly the expert in your own athletes. So use your own discernment as you receive and listen to the information that you're getting to today. Just a little bit of a disclaimer. I always like to also really be clear, like, what is this and what isn't this, right? So it's always great. And I think this is so great for just like the space that the world that we're moving in today. Like, and I talk about this with my athletes constantly. Like, guys, what you're seeing on social media is not prescriptive individual advice for you. Just because you read something somewhere on the internet does not mean that that is actually directed at you. This, again, my session today is not the end all be all, right? It is one lens. It's one way to think about it. And maybe you walk out of here with one or two things that really allow you to take care of your mental health, but also help the community that you're in. So this is about conversation. This is about reflection. This is about hearing and listening and taking some things away. It is not my way or the highway. And it is certainly not like clinical or medical individualized advice for you guys as coaches. Okay. So I'm here for Morgan's message. That's part of where I spend my time in a lot of different places, and Morgan's message is one. I'm so honored and thankful to be a part of an incredible organization. And really, our mission is really bringing awareness and amplifying, this conversation around mental health and making it more accessible for really all parties involved in sport and sport culture, but even beyond that, right? But athletes, parents, coaches, sport organizations, so that we really do move towards the equalization of mental and physical health. And we do that in a few ways. We kind of have these main initiatives, which is our campus ambassador program, which if you're coaching at the high school or college level, you probably have heard of Morgan's message, right? Maybe your actual campus or athletes on your campus have a chapter, which is awesome. So that is by way of, we're distributing resources and education, and we have programming that we're doing. So I help and oversee some of that. We also have our at-large program, which is for people who aren't athletes that want to be involved. So these are community members and former athletes and parents and coaches. You guys could be at-large ambassadors. And then we have our podcast, the Mental Matchup podcast, which is fantastic. Kat does an awesome job with this. If you guys are podcast people, I highly encourage you to go check it out. And you can always take a look at our website, www.morgansmessage.org, for just learning more about us and all that we do. So my background, I won't spend too much time here. Like I said, I'm a former Division I athlete, former Division I coach. I spend most of my time running my own company, doing kind of mindfulness and performance and resiliency training with mostly college. I do some in the high school space. And I also work as a therapist. So, my areas of expertise, as a clinically trained therapist, I'm working in trauma. I'm working with people who have quite literally seen the most devastating and horrific things, and helping them through that. And so I do and kind of bring to the table a really unique skill set in terms of the nervous system and working somatically with people. And I take a lot of that knowledge and then I bring it into sport and sport culture, because I actually think so much of those tools and skills really help athletes connect to their mind body, learn how to be resilient. And we're going to talk about this word resilient today because it actually relies on our nervous system. It's a physiological process. So that's kind of what I do. That's where I spend my time. And then obviously I'm the director of the Medical Advisory Council at Morgan's Message, which again, so thankful. And we're really excited to be here today. So let's get into this. And I will say that today's session is actually, I'm pulling this, this is something that I am so passionate about and I love it, working with coaches. I actually have a coaching curriculum called Resilient and Empowered Coaching. And so I'm actually pulling from my own curriculum today for you guys. And really the foundation of this is this kind of understanding and creating more awareness around mental health from the resiliency lens, which allows us as coaches to be more compassionate and empathetic and actually come to coaching from a more what we call strengths-based lens, which actually empowers and helps our athletes build more resiliency. So this stuff, what we're talking about today and mental health in general, this conversation around mental health, it's not soft, right? It is not letting kids off the hook. It's not being weak, right? This is actually resilience. And this quote right here comes from a mentor of mine in the trauma field. With more empowerment comes more responsibility. And what we as coaches actually want to do for our athletes is build their capacity to be with really difficult things in life so that they do feel like they have the ability to handle it. And therefore they gain more responsibility and agency for their mental health. This is what we're talking about, okay? So in order to do that and to get to that phase, though, we really need to understand what mental health is. And the reality is that mental health as a word, as an experience, as something that we're talking about is really complex. Guys, I'm going to tell you this right now. Like, I have had a journey with mental health. I'm pretty open about my own personal story with my mental health, and I'm a trained therapist, and I've been working in this stuff for a while. And like, there are still things that I'm learning and trying to understand about mental health. It's very, very complex. And what we often think, especially in sport and sport culture, is that it's this. It's your attitude. It's just this kind of mental and emotional space, right? And it's really all on the individual. And I'm just going to tell you right now that if we continue to think of mental health as just a mental thing, right, we are getting it wrong. That's not comprehensive enough. And we're actually failing ourselves. We're failing our athletes. And here's the thing, because that term mental can actually be really misleading. All right. The reason being is that your mind and your body do not operate separately. It's not possible. Right? If we actually like peel back the skin and the layers and really look at how the human as an organism functions, it's not possible. Your brain and your body do not operate separately. And so for a really long time in sport, right, we've talked about the kind of physical, the technical, the tactical aspect of what an athlete does. And then, oh yeah, right? There's this mental component too. And I really break that misconception down, because the two cannot operate separately. It does not work, right? So mental health is really actually much more holistic than just your mind or just your mental state or just your attitude or just your emotions, right? So even if you look, and I'm not going to read, I don't expect you guys to read. I just want you to take a look, and this right here paints a picture for like why mental health can be so complicated, because we don't have a single or sole working definition for mental health. Okay. These are some of the largest. The APA, the CDC, and the WHO are three of the largest, if not the largest, like governing bodies and organizations around health, let alone mental health. And look at them. Yeah, sure, they're somewhat saying the same thing, but they're also not, right? I mean, we don't have, and then you look at just good old Google, right? I mean, I just pulled that from the Google dictionary. So we do not have a single sole working definition for mental health. We don't have a single sole working definition for something like anxiety or stress, right? Or resiliency. Okay. So this makes it then really hard for us as sport coaches and our athletes, right? To like really wrap our brains around what mental health is. Now, the other thing that I'll say is that a lot of the conversation and the direction of mental health has really been steered by what's wrong with you. It has been steered, and my background's in clinical social work. So I am constantly thinking from not just like the individual level, but much more the macro, like world level and impact that has on all of us. And the reality is that our model of mental health and our frame and view of mental health comes from the DSM. It comes from a medical model that constantly looks at people and says, what's wrong with you? That's not actually helping anyone. I'm going to be really honest with you, right? And so the driving principle of this, if you look at that kind of third line, is disorder, right? What is wrong with you, right? What problem do you have? And I'm just going to tell you right now, I think it's too narrow, and I think it really limits people. And so the conversation we're going to have today is really reframing that, reshaping that, and looking at mental health from a much more holistic, worldly lens. Okay. So this is what I call, we're broadening the lens on mental health. It is not just about what's wrong with you, right? It's about, this larger picture of well-being, right? As a human, to be human, to be alive, right? So everyone on this Zoom right now, and there's 58 people on here, right? You're alive, right? You're functioning, you're on a Zoom, you're working your computer, you're listening to me, which means you're alive, which means you have mental health. Okay. So we have to, and I think this broadening, when we broaden the lens and we come to this from a more holistic place, it actually allows us to step into connection, more effective, compassionate, empathetic connection with our athletes. And that is the foundation of empowerment. That is the foundation of building resiliency. That is the foundation of really allowing them to step into and have the agency to be more responsible for their mental health. So I really think that, again, this is the name of the game. So We need to look at this, which is that mental health, again, it's really complex. And I always say that mental health is never just an individual experience. We place a lot of emphasis in sport, and particularly in the mental performance realm, right? This term around, I'll be really honest with you guys, I don't use the term mental toughness. I don't like it. I think language is really important. And I think the term mental toughness actually feeds the mental health stigma. Um, and the reason being is it puts so much emphasis on the kid. It puts so much emphasis on just the athlete to sort it out, to be tough, to be gritty, to be, you know, mentally whatever they need to perform. And that's actually it's never just an individual thing. And here's the reason for that, because your mental health is going to be influenced and impacted by how you identify. So take an athlete on your team. Pick one, doesn't matter. You probably have anywhere from, 25 to 30 kids on your team. Maybe that's too much for a field hockey roster, but what's their gender? What's their race? What's their ethnicity? What did they grow up with socioeconomically wise, right? Sexuality, religion. How does that athlete identify? Because that is actually going to be a major influencer in their mental health. It's going to constantly be impacting it. So is their actual biology, right? And so when we get into, a lot of people are like, oh, a lot of the mental health, is it nature? Is it nurture? It's both. It's all of the above. So yes, 1000%, right? This is biology, biological predispositions. What are the genetic factors they're actually getting from their mom and dad and their mom and dad, right? This is called epigenetics, which is that, oh yeah, when we get born, we grab some of the DNA from our parents. So did an athlete on your team grow up with parents that went through really horrific, traumatic things? Did they grow up with parents that constantly struggled financially and were always stressed? Did they grow up with parents that were totally taken care of, supported their entire lives? Because that, by way of genes, is going to play on that kid's mental health. It is, right? We can actually look at this and study it, okay? We can look at people's DNA. And then there's the actual just physical and medical health of your student athletes, right? So, wow, okay, but wait a second. Oh yeah, it's also everything that kid has lived through up until the day that they get to your campus or your program. So I always say this. I was speaking at a thing in Philly yesterday, and I said to the audience, I said, if you're a coach, the athlete you're getting on a Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock at practice is never just the athlete on Tuesday at 3 o'clock at practice. You're getting that athlete. If that athlete's 18 years old, you're getting that athlete on Tuesday at 3 o'clock plus 18 years of lived experience, plus their parents, plus their family dynamic, plus their identity, right? You're getting a lot, okay? So it's not just, it is not just the individual's, kind of like mental mood or emotions. It's way bigger than that. And we actually know that a primary driver in mental health, and particularly mental health challenges, stems around what we call attachment, which is the relationship that people had with their family units and their caregivers, their parents. Okay. So this stuff is really, really complex. And then this last piece, which is that we don't live in isolation. We don't live by ourselves. We live in social structures, what we call social context, which is, wow, oh my gosh, I grew up in a family unit, or I didn't grow up in a family unit. Because I know many players and organizations that are actually getting kids that are in foster homes or that are homeless, right? Society, the larger society we live in, the systems of oppression and racism that we constantly are facing in our lives today, school systems, athletic organizations, religious organizations, right? So if you're taking a look at this on the receiving end, of this Zoom, and you're going, oh my gosh, Emily has just opened Pandora's box. Yes, I have. And we're going to work backwards now, right? Because yes, I think ultimately we do as coaches have a responsibility to understand this and to acknowledge this. Now, at the same time, right, does all of this and the complexity of mental health excuse things like being mean? No. Does it excuse things like just not showing up to practice? No, right? But what it does change is the relationship and your potential as a coach to step into connection with that kid, right? And actually move towards a place of empowerment and building resilience, right? Rather than blame and shame. And I think that is ultimately how we are going to shift the culture around mental health in sport, okay? So again, I'm a really visual person. I like to put this information in a lot of different ways. So you can think about it as an upside down triangle. Notice that the person is at the very bottom of the triangle, right? So this world that we're living in, the larger systems, right? That social context piece is feeding into our families and our communities, which is then feeding into our athletes, right? So the individual is the bottom. That's the last piece of the equation, right? So there's a lot that's feeding into mental health. It's very complex, right? So this is how I, to my athletes, to my coaches, to any organizations that I work with, describe mental health. I say mental health includes the health of all of these things: our physical body, our mind, our emotions, how we connect, relate, interact with the people in our lives, and then how we also connect with and relate to the world around us, the places that we're spending our time in. So this right here, if we go back all the way to like what we often think of as mental health, as just like mood and mental toughness and yeah, wow, right? This right here totally shifts the narrative on that, right? So I think that if we really start taking a broader, more holistic lens on what mental health is and how complex it is, again, I think we're actually going to be able to, as coaches, one, take care of our own mental health more, because that is a place that, especially being a former college coach, like that's an area that unfortunately sport culture doesn't set us up well to do. But your mental health directly impacts the mental health of your athletes. Your mental health is valid. I am such a proponent of, yes, we need to be having this conversation around mental health with our athletes all day long. We also need to be having it for you guys. We do not give enough support, resources, care to you guys as coaches. So this allows you to now come to your own mental health and well-being, right? In more efficient ways, in ways that actually support you yourself, but also how we connect with and show up for our athletes, okay? So we're going to take a second. I'm actually going to take you through a mental health or a resiliency practice, okay? So if you're with me, we're going to do one of my favorites. This is a mindfulness practice. I give it to almost every athlete I work with, every team. It's a mindful pause. It's pretty elementary, pretty basic, but it's actually really profound. So I've given you a lot so far, so we're just going to pause. We're going to let it digest, all right? So if you're seating, that's not a word. If you're sitting, what I want you to do is just place both feet on the ground. So if these were my feet, place them both on the ground. I want you to just kind of land and arrive in your seat. Just pause, put everything down, put your phone down, put your pen down. There's nowhere to be right now. I want you to just take a breath. I want you to take maybe just a more deliberate, intentional breath in through your nose. And then I want you to let that breath go and just completely exhale out. Feel free to do that one more time. But I just want you to check in with these three things. What's my mind thinking about right now? Just take note of that. Or you can also go, how does my mind feel? What am I feeling? Do I have an emotion right now? How do I feel physically? How does my physical body feel? And you're trying to answer those in one or two words. All right. And what that mindful pause does, that practice does, is it slows us down. We live in a society that is go, 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 right? I mean, our athletes are here and they're there, and you guys are here and there, and we got to go recruit. And now we're packing our suitcase for this tournament. And I mean, just think about our lives. And you guys have families probably and kids. I mean, we live in go, 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 go. And so the very simple yet profound, right, practice of just not doing that for a second, pausing, slowing down. One, there's a physiological piece to this, which is we're actually sending cues to our nervous system that like, it's okay to rest. It's okay to slow down and to be with ourselves and to take care of ourselves. But we're actually taking a moment of awareness to really collect ourselves and say, how am I doing right now? And then we use that awareness to come to the next thing on our to-do list, the next thing that we have to show up for, the conversation we may need to have with our athletes. Okay. So this mindful pause it's a really big deal. And so we're going to take that pause 2 more times throughout our workshop today. And so if you're feeling yourself kind of like, oh my gosh, Emily is throwing a lot at me, I am. And so we're going to pause, we're going to breathe. It's all going to be okay. By the end of this, you're going to feel much more agency stepping into this world of mental health. But this pause really allows us to do that. feel free to take this back to your team. This is not rocket science. I didn't invent this, right? I just use it quite frequently, okay? So let's look at how this thing is showing up. How is mental health showing up, right? How is this connection of the physical body and the mind and the emotions and connection with other people? And how's it showing up in sport and our sport teams? Well, there's a lot here. I'm not going to read all that. So the column on the left, right, is that, more so what we would say kind of like just I would say maybe more day to day, kind of like, getting overwhelmed easily. Well, I can tell you right now, every single college athlete I work with is overwhelmed almost every other day. To the stuff on the right, which is like, okay, we're dabbling into some very serious mental health challenges, which is suicidal ideation and self-harm and substance usage. And I mean, these are really real things, right? I mean, as someone who has been in inpatient psychiatric care, I mean, there are athletes every single day that are needing to go into hospitalization. So we've got a spectrum. And I think what this shows right here is that this is showing up on a spectrum, right? From the very human stuff of getting anxious and stressed, which I really like to normalize and humanize, to, oh man, like someone is having to get actual inpatient psychiatric care, which is very, very serious, right? This stuff occurs on a spectrum. And I'm sure however long you guys have been coaching, you've seen the wide spectrum, right? So this stuff is, this is why we're having these conversations. So if there's something on here that you're kind of like, oh, yep, I see that, or, oh, yep, I've dealt with that. Like, I want to really validate that, right? Even as a college coach, I saw some of this, but even in the work I do, I see this stuff every single day, right? But again, if we're coming to this from the lens of resiliency, right, and broadening the lens, we also have to remember and take a step back, right, with this view that mental health is not just about the kid that has a bad attitude, or not just about the kid that's chronically anxious, right? There's a lot more to the puzzle, right? Which is, I'm just going to tell you right now, there's that upside down triangle again, and there's been a lot going on in our world the last 5 years. I mean, outside of the pandemic, right, which is, been the one thing that I think has driven the conversation around mental health. But I mean, I'm just gonna tell you right now, technology and social media is a real problem. I mean, we've actually been looking at, there's some really interesting research coming out that is showing that technology, social media, things like Instagram, where a lot of our kids are spending time, like, it's actually changing the structure, like the neural wiring of brains. Okay. So this stuff is a really big deal, and it is impacting our kids, whether they are directly influenced by it or not. Okay. And again, we have to remember that it's a trickle down effect. So that then affects the family units of our athletes, the support and resources of our athletes, the actual education system, the athletic organization that you're in. And then again, all the way down to the biology, the actual interpersonal dynamics of your athletes. So there's been a heck of a lot going on in the last 5 years. And again, I don't say that to like, okay, well, like, let's let everybody off the hook and like free range, our kids can just do whatever they want. No. Again, I think that this allows us to really come into connection with our athletes from a place of empathy and compassion, so that we can actually really have more constructive and effective conversations that then leave our athletes feeling more empowered and having more agency around building resilience, right? So that they're not staying in these places of despair or self-destructive stuff, okay? So this really gets into the question around resilience, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but what we're getting at in this conversation around mental health, and really what's underneath mental health, is an individual's ability to be resilient. And I think, honestly, if I could leave you with anything, it would be replacing this term of mental toughness with resilience. I don't actually think we want our athletes to be mentally tough. If we actually look at language, and again, language is so important, mentally tough doesn't actually get at everything we're wanting from an athlete. What we're wanting is this right here. Right? This is resilience. This is not being tough, right? Tough could be a component of this, but again, it's not the word is not comprehensive enough. It's much bigger. We want them to be able to regulate their nervous systems and navigate emotion and problem solve and have good habits around sleep and eating and all of that, right? Communicate with others. This is resilience. This is not being mentally tough. This is resilience. That's the word I use. Again, use your own discernment. Like if you want to go with the term mental toughness or kind of however you describe it in your program, that's fine. But again, what I'm really trying to encourage us to do as sport coaches, and this is not just field hockey, this is everywhere, right? Is think from this lens of bigger, more holistic, because again, I think that actually serves our athletes. It serves ourselves, but it serves our athletes more. So again, it's really important to acknowledge that how we move through tough stuff is actually a really body-based thing. It has very little to do with our thinking, our willpower, right? I mean, I think a lot of times this conversation around mental toughness in athletes is this like, it's this mental, like, oh, well, you've got to will yourself, and it's got to be a thinking thing, and you've got to think good things, and that's not how we handle tough stuff. If we actually look at the physiology of a human being, how we move through tough stuff and how we rise to hard things in life is through our nervous system. It's through what we call our stress response, our physiology. That's not a cognitive thinking thing. Twofold, right? Look at that guy on the right, which is we know that one of the ways, right? One of the things that actually helps people be resilient is they have people in their lives that can help them. Right? I mean, this research goes across not just individual tragedy, but also like worldwide tragedy, right? There's a really fascinating study they've done on, I think it was Katrina and then also 9/11, right? And one of the things they looked at with Katrina, particularly Hurricane Katrina, was the fact that the people of Louisiana, the people of New Orleans, actually had way less care and support in how they recovered, right? As opposed to 9/11. And again, I'm not saying these are much more complex and complicated than just this, but one of the things we do know that is a major buffer in mental health is care and support, connection, resources, right? And I'm just going to tell you right now, with how our healthcare system is in the United States, like not all of our athletes have equal access to good quality mental health care. So the time that your athletes come in, right, you don't have athletes that are all on equal playing field, so to speak, around the resources and the care that they have. Okay. So again, this then, as you're listening to this, I mean, my hope would be that now, hopefully some light bulbs are going off that go, wow, how might that actually then change how I step into a conversation about mental health or resiliency with my athlete? I think it really can at times if we really understand and honor this, right? That so much of resilience is not really just on the kid. It's not really just on a mental thing and willpower and being kind of mentally tough. It's a lot bigger than that. Okay. So here, I'm not going to read all this, but resilience, right, it's a mind and body based thing. It is what is allowing your kids to handle hard better. There's that amazing, I think it's Kara Lawson, right, out of Duke, that she talks about, I want my kids to handle hard better. Yes, we all do, right? And we need to understand that handling hard better is not just a mental thing, right? It's not just a thinking thing. It's not just, again, this willpower thing. It's a very body-based thing. It's very holistic, and a lot of it has to do with the care, the resources, and support that a kid has. And what I will also say is there's been some really good research around the role that a coach can play in that. So we actually know that if a kid, for example, if an athlete grows up in a family where maybe it's a very broken home and they don't really have the adequate support or resources, they don't have good access to care. If that kid, and we've looked at the research on this, if that kid has a coach, a sport coach in their life that is supportive and helps them and is empowering and helps them be resilient, that can be profound. That can be life-changing for a kid. So the role that we play as sport coaches is incredibly profound on our kids' mental health, right? We also have been able to look at the opposite. So we also know that a sport coach that is abusive, or that is not even abusive, but really kind of doesn't understand a lot of what we're talking about and is constantly kind of harping and overly critical and just really very rigid, can also have the opposite effect, right? So this role that you guys, that we, because I'm a coach as well, that we play as sport coaches is so profound. And I think it is our responsibility to really continue to understand this stuff, okay? Because it eventually, again, it not just helps us as human beings, because all of this matters for us too, how we be resilient, but it truly helps our athletes. Okay, let's take that pause again, right? So a lot of information. There's a lot of things I'm throwing at you. It's about 12:36, so we're 36 minutes in. If your brain feels like it's in overload, let's pause. Let's take a step back, right? Let's breathe. Everybody take a deep breath. Not even a deep breath, just take a normal breath. What we actually know is many people who have or who are navigating mental health challenges hold their breath. And so this taking a normal breath and an intentional breath can be a really profound thing. Just want you to notice and collect, where's your mind at? How's your mind feel? How are you feeling? Any emotions present? How do I feel physically? And the one thing I'll add here is that, is there something right now on this Zoom call, or whether you're watching it later, that I can do that can take care of myself? I can tell you I'm very dehydrated when I talk. I know I also talk very fast, so hopefully you guys are keeping up with me. It's something I'm working on, but I also am chronically I need water. So you know what I'm going to do as your presenter who's going to take a moment to pause and take care of myself? I'm going to take a drink of water. All right. So notice how these pauses, and think about where you can implement this as a coach, right? I mean, oh my gosh, in practice, in the middle of a drill, halftime, right? I mean, this stuff, pausing can be really profound, both psychologically, mentally, but also physically. Okay. So hopefully that pause was nice to let the second wave of information simmer. Okay. And so now we're going to move into best practices. What the heck do we do about all this? And so what I'll say is, like, this is also really complex. I mean, this could, and in the world of coaching and help, like educating coaches on this, I mean, this could take a year, right? Because this stuff is constantly changing. There's so many layers to this. So I pulled kind of three major tenets of what I think are best practices for coaches for you guys today, knowing that this is not comprehensive. This is not gonna, this is not gonna answer every single one of your questions, but it'll give you some good takeaways to think about, okay? So the first thing is going to be about you. It's going to be about your mental health. And the second thing is going to be this continuation of just building that awareness, looking at some things we can be looking out around mental health, looking out for around mental health. And then the last piece is going to be the power of listening. One of my favorite things to teach and educate on. Okay. So let's start with you guys as coaches that are often, I will say as a former college coach, an assistant in that kind of third assistant spot, I often felt like my mental health was not really a priority. I didn't make it a priority either. So it goes both ways. And I really, I'm actually going to show this slide first because I want to acknowledge this now, which is that I fully acknowledge that sport culture does not prioritize your mental health. The system of sports does not prioritize you. The system of sport, more often than not, is telling you that you as a head coach, you need to win, or else your livelihood and your job is on the chopping block, right? Like, that's very real. I understand that. I am the daughter of a coach, a college coach that got fired at one point, right? I know this better than anyone, okay? That is something that I hope by having more discussions around this, and God, knock on wood, I don't go anywhere in the next, I don't know, 2 decades, but I'm still pretty young. So hopefully I stay in this for a while, but like that we continue to advocate for your mental health, because this is so important. You guys are such an important piece of sport culture. And not to mention the lives of people, of athletes. This right here is so much bigger, and it's so important. Okay. So I fully acknowledge that. And I also know that this right here is a reason that there's so much turnover in coaching, right? I get that. I'm not ignoring that. I know that that's there. And at the same time, that's not going to get solved today on our Zoom. Okay. So now I'll go back. Taking care of you is really important. I think how we take care of ourselves, it doesn't just role model for our athletes good mental health and overall well-being, right? But we also need to look at this piece of what's called co-regulation, which is something that I think we're not talking enough about in sport and sport culture. So co-regulation is it's biologically hardwired into us that our nervous systems actually sync up and feed off of the nervous systems of the people we spend our time with. So within your team, your athletes' nervous systems are picking up and feeding off each other. Your athletes' nervous systems are picking up and feeding off of you. So, and look, right? Like, we know that coaches, right? Especially coaches that are abusive, highly critical, like they have the same impact as a potential parent. So this is really, really big. Okay. So I think it is, and this is why we as sport culture, we're a pretty broken system. Like, we need to move in the direction of helping you guys take care of you. But I think personally, as coaches, and I really talk to my coaches about taking really small steps that allow you to daily take care of you, right? Creating routines and habits, because that then allows you to show up and have the bandwidth and the resiliency to be with your athletes. Okay. Again, going back to that slide, I know that we don't have a culture that allows you to do that often, but I hope we're headed in the right direction. So I always say this one's the principle of A squared. This starts with awareness and then action. So the first thing that you guys have to do as coaches is, like, you have to really start working on your own awareness around your mental health, right? And I think this is why I include the mindful pause in these types of presentations, because a mindful pause can be a really great way to actually gain awareness, right? We're stopping, we're slowing down, we're checking with our mind, emotions, and our body. That allows you, and you can do that in 10 seconds, right? That allows you to go, oh, how am I doing? How am I doing mind, body, and even soul, right? So that, right, I can then move into action. I can then move into, okay, what do I need to do? What are the micro practices, routines, habits that I can establish that really allow me to take care of me? I use the principle of move the needle every day with my athletes and my teams. How can you move the needle 1 inch every single day for your mental health? So I'll show you, these are actually taken from me and the coaches that I work with. Self-care, I think, often gets misrepresented of what that is. So I don't often use the term self-care. But these are along the lines of self-care. And, like, look, there's a lot of ways to do this, right? There's no cookie cutter approach. If any of you follow me on social media, you'll know that, like, I'm a really body-based person. So, like, I'm constantly putting my legs up. I'm using restorative postures. I'm using breath work, right? That's how I really take care of me, because it's a really holistic approach to how I take care of my, again, mental health, which is a really multifaceted, holistic thing. So take a screenshot of this, take a picture of it on your phone, like, pick 2 things. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. What is one thing every single day you can do? Because I'm going to tell you right now that one thing is going to bleed into 2 things. And that 2 things is going to bleed into a week's worth of habits that's allowing you to really proactively stay on top of your holistic well-being. That is then going to put you day after day on a consistent level to show up and show up well in connection with your athletes. Your resilience matters. This stuff helps you continue to build your resilience. Okay. I also have, and I'll show you my resources at the very end, but I have a couple workbooks that have a ton of free stuff. I've got a YouTube channel, so you can use all of that stuff as well, adding on to kind of whatever you're already doing to take care of yourself. Okay. Now, the second piece is we do, and I think this conversation today has all been about building awareness around mental health. But this, what, again, I think this visual right here really gets at it, which is these, I call it the resilience colored glasses, which is like, we're coming to mental health from this view of resilience, which is shifting from what happened to you, or sorry, from what's wrong with you, right? I did that backwards, but that's okay. What's wrong with you to what has happened in your life? What have you lived through? How are you trying to make meaning of what's happened to you, right? How are you trying to navigate it? And how are you equipped to handle it? Because that on the left is really, right, the kind of framework and the questions that we should be coming to our athletes with, right? And quite frankly, coming to ourselves with, right? I mean, as a therapist and someone that's in therapy, right, weekly, like, this is a constant struggle, because, again, our model of mental health has been on the right. Our model of mental health has been driven by what's wrong with you. Let's pick out a DSM. I don't even know where my DSM is. You can tell I don't really use my DSM. Ah, here it is. Okay. DSM, right? This thing is thick, right? This isn't even the latest version. This is all just disorders. We label them disorders. We label them illness, right? Not once is the word resilience, right, put in this book. Right? So this is what's wrong with you. Let's find all the symptoms and the things that we could pick apart here, right? Instead of, right, what has happened to you? How are you trying to make meaning of the things that you lived in? And don't get me wrong, right? Like, we need a DSM, right? We need And there are so many people that find it very helpful, right, to have a diagnosis. And I will also tell you that one of the main reasons we have things like diagnostic criteria is so we can bill it, so we can have insurance cover it, right? It's not actually a lens that allows us to really see and hear people. So that's my take on it. Okay. I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but I think it really does help broaden this perspective and help us really come into so much compassion and empathy for our athletes, which is the starting place of then empowerment and resiliency. Okay. So keep trying to come from this lens of putting your resilience colored glasses on. Okay. Because again, everything occurs on a spectrum, right? I mean, I'm a really visual person. So like, here's the thing, like one of my things that I am such an advocate of is like, let's humanize things. Let's humanize the fact that we have anxiety. That's actually hardwired into our biology to get anxious. It comes from the fear system. It comes from our survival system. It keeps us alive. That's not wrong. That's not bad, right? And it occurs on a spectrum, right? But again, right, really coming to that, right, as a coach and remembering, right, can help us actually come into really compassionate connection with our athletes, right? So if you're going to look out like on this spectrum, right, for things, I think it's always good as coaches to kind of be aware of some things. And I just put these in this is not comprehensive or all inclusive, but these are very general. They're very broad. And these are probably things that you've already heard before, but it's always good to just kind of keep in the back of your brain. I'm not going to read off the slides, but like certainly like actual physical changes within your athletes, right? Things that as a coach, right, you spend probably more time than anyone with your athletes, and things that if you were to show up and kind of see your athlete over the course of 2 to 3 days and go, oh, wow, something's not right there. Yep, probably, right? So really knowing that, okay? Things around sleep, things around dramatic, and I'm talking like, again, out of the ordinary, right? Mood, increase in worry. And that's a very controversial one because, oh my gosh, there's so much worry in the world right now. So I spend a lot of time just kind of normalizing worry, not necessarily making it wrong because there's a lot of things in the world to worry about, but obviously, kind of an increase or this very drastic increase of it, that's very noticeable could be one. I think this impairment of day-to-day functioning, right? And I'm not talking about like, okay, a hard day. We all have hard days, right? But very noticeable kind of shifts or changes in the kind of like day-to-day or even maybe week to week, right? For your athletes. Isolation. I think self-harm is always one that we want to have in the back of our brains, just because you guys as coaches are going to be in spaces where your athletes have more skin exposed, right? Because, I know like some teams, like we at Penn used to give our kids like a practice t-shirt that was a tank top, right? So you're going to see more skin that's exposed. And so just being aware, right? Looking out for that. And then I think obviously substance use, but I think that fourth bullet point is a really big one, which is that like, if an athlete is verbally telling you like, I'm not okay, something doesn't feel right, I don't feel normal, something's not okay, it's not on us. It's not on me as a coach. It's not on me as a therapist. It's not on us as coaches to go, nah, you're good. Like, if an athlete is vulnerable enough, right, to really come and say, like, I'm actually worried about myself, right? Like, something doesn't feel right. We need to really honor and respect that, right? We don't have any leeway or room to contradict that because that's not our experience, right? Even if we don't agree with it or we're not seeing the same thing, like we have to go off what they are communicating to us, okay? And lastly, right, there are limited signs. I mean, that's the hardest part about mental health. It's again, it's very holistic. There's a lot going on. It's very complex, and we're really good at hiding things. We have a culture that really reinforces this because of the stigma. I think we're getting better. I think we're headed in the right direction, which is fantastic, but we really need to understand that mental health and challenges with our mental health are going to manifest and look different in every single person. I mean, I don't have two clients, especially clinically, that present or give me the same thing. So it's very complex. And the reality is it's not our job as coaches to catch it all. We're not going to, right? This kind of comes from the lens of what we call trauma-informed care, which is that harm, right, and failure to see all the signs, it is going to occur. How do we repair? How do we come back into support and connection with our athletes, right? That's what we're going for, right? And then hopefully, right, we continue to move sport culture in the right direction where we're having less and less of not seeing signs, right? Or we're having less and less of people hiding things. Okay. So that was number 2, right? The starts with you, your health, your mental health first, and then continuing to build that awareness coming from resilience, colored glasses, and understanding some warning signs. And now we just get into listening. And this listening piece is a part of what I coin like mindful and resilient based communication, which is such a passion of mine. I think it is so, communication is the foundation of connection and relationship. Communication is it stems off language, which is how we make meaning of everything. And communication from us to our athletes is absolutely critical. I think it's like if we're using the house analogy of building a house of a relationship, it's the foundation. And listening is just one component, but I think it's probably the most important piece in my opinion, because the reality is we as humans don't listen well. And a lot of times what's happening is we're trying to listen to our athletes, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm guilty of this as a therapist because I'm human. We're listening to our athletes, and as they're talking to us, we're already trying to solve. We're already trying to figure out the answer. And as soon as you shift into that, you're not listening anymore. Right? So really trying to come to listening from a place of the floor is yours. And so much of that starts with this slide right here. So much of our ability to listen is about us. Your preparation, right? Your awareness, verbally and non-verbally, right? To come into communication with your athletes, it starts with you. I am constantly talking to my coaches about if you're stepping into communication and conversation with your athletes, especially around mental health, you need to prepare. You need to prepare yourself mentally. You need to prepare yourself emotionally. You need to prepare yourself physically. Because if you are not in a place, right, to actually engage and support and listen well, you are going to fail your athlete. And I'm telling you this from personal experience of doing this as a clinically trained therapist. I mean, they actually teach you this when you're becoming a therapist. Like there will be times where you come into connection with people and you fail them because you are not actually prepared to come into that connection and serve the other person. Because when we are in a listening role, we are taking a back seat. Right? It is not about our objective to solve, because I'm going to tell you this right now, more often than not, you guys as coaches are not going to solve what your athletes are going through. It's not possible. Even me as a therapist, I don't solve anything. Because to be honest with you, I don't have all the answers. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the world that there's no solution to right now. So it's not our job to solve. Coaching, therapy, these kind of like supporting roles, like it's not about solving and having all the answers. Get rid of that agenda because it's going to be the most freeing thing that you do. Your agenda should be to be present and to be engaged and to both verbally and non-verbally communicate to that athlete that I am here, I see you, I am with you, and what you have to say matters. And it is the only thing that matters to me right now. And so what I'm going to tell you now is that takes a lot of bandwidth. It takes a lot of bandwidth. There's a reason that Friday night for me, I'm sitting there thinking like, I don't want to open my mouth or talk to another human. I need to sit on the couch and like totally disconnect from the world. Like this takes a lot of work. And so we as coaches, we have a responsibility to really prepare ourselves and really understand how we are doing, right? Before we step into these conversations and connections. And I think it's also really valuable for us to also communicate to the athlete, like, hey, one, understand if it's a dire conversation, that like crisis that needs to happen now, or if you can't have that conversation and actually give the athlete what they need, how do you communicate that? There have been times where I have had to look at an athlete in my role as a coach, as like a mindfulness coach, and say, you know what? Right now, I am so overwhelmed and tapped out, and I don't have bandwidth to have this conversation. And what you deserve is for me to show up and be present and to be really engaged. And I cannot do that for you right now. So is this a crisis? And more often than not, they will say no. And I say, can we reschedule? Can we schedule this for tomorrow? And the athlete will go, yeah, thank you. Actually, I really appreciate that. Because if we don't do that and we don't take ownership in that, what's going to happen is I'm going to step into that conversation and I'm going to check out and I'm going to feel overwhelmed, and I'm not going to actually verbally and non-verbally communicate that I'm with them, right? And giving them what they need. And then what that athlete is going to turn around and feel is like, I don't matter. Coach didn't really hear me. Emily didn't really care about what I had to say. And that is not what we want. And that's not how we feel as coaches. But I know because of the demands that are placed on you guys, a lot of times that's what's happening. So I think this listening piece and really preparing yourself to come into listening. And I'm going to tell you this right now, like use a mindful pause, right? you have an athlete coming into your office or you're meeting them at a field or something, and you guys I know are at a variety of levels, but like, how do you use a mindful pause before you step into communication and listening to your athlete? Because that can be a really great practice to use. Okay. So, here's the last piece. I know we've got about 4 minutes left. So what are we listening for? I'm not going to read this slide. Feel free to just scan it, but you're listening, and listening can sometimes be a form of, yes, in the ears, but also taking in with sight. What are you also seeing from the athlete in their body language, verbally and non-verbally, right? That's actually a form of listening. And so can we really listen from a place to learn more, from a place of what I call the beginner's mind, which is like, I don't know best, I'm human, right? Like, I'm sure you struggle with many of the same things that your athletes might struggle with, right? Where can you simply just reflect and ask questions and validate? And then at some point, right, if you need to step into action, you're stepping into action, right? You're solving. And that's a totally different conversation and skill set, which is going to really depend on your organization and where you are and all of that jazz. Okay. So listening. Huge. All right. So what I want you to think about in wrapping up is what's one key takeaway? What's one key learning moment from today? What's one thing that you felt like, oh, dang, that one really stuck out to me? Or, oh, I really like that. Or, oh, maybe I didn't like that. I mean, I think learning moments can also be what you don't like, right? I mean, I think it's just important to know what you don't resonate with, what you don't like as what you do. So one key learning moment, right? And then I want you to think about what's one way that you might be able to use what you've learned and bring it back to your sport environment. And so maybe that's as simple as like, wow, I really liked the mindful pause, and like, wow, I'm actually going to do that before we start practice every day. Or I don't know, when we finish up a drill or something like that. Like, just one key takeaway. I'm a huge advocate of like, let's move from just like absorbing information to bringing it down to actionable items. Maybe it has to do with self-care. So like, oh, okay, I'm going to go take a walk for myself today. So one learning moment, and then one thing that you're going to potentially try to bring back and implement into your sport environment. Okay. So the last thing I'll say here is like, please check us out. We are so, I mean, oh my gosh, Morgan's Message is, it really is one of the greatest honors to be a part of their organization. And we're doing just such incredible work every single day. So check us out. The community that Morgan's Message has built over the last, kind of 4 years has just been incredible. And so I am positive that many of you on this call today have chapters, and get involved, like reach out to the ambassadors that are on your campus and see what they're doing, and reach out to us, follow us. If you're not following us on social media, please do, because we put a ton out there. We also have, again, the Mental Matchup podcast, which we definitely want you to check out. And then if you are wanting to learn more about me, I'm pretty accessible. You can find me pretty much anywhere. If you go to any of those places, you'll find just a ton of resources. I have a couple just kind of like PDF downloads for free that I know a lot of coaches like to then take back or share with their team. So please give us a holler at Morgan's Message. We'd love to hear from you. And more than anything, oh, it's 12:59. I've got 30 seconds to spare. More than anything, we really appreciate you guys having us. Again, this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I love it. I love working with coaches. I think this is so needed. Your mental health is so important to me. So thank you so much for having us. And I hope something in here was valuable today.
Thank you so much, Emily, and thanks to Morgan's Message. That was excellent, and we continue to learn and reflect, and that pause, that mindful pause, I think we can all take that as a key takeaway in addition to some other valuable information. So thanks again for helping us equalize the treatment of mental and physical health. And as I mentioned previously, this will be available in our NFHCA video library through the member portal. So thanks again for joining us, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks.